Breaking tonight, new fallout as free speech comes under attack in America, not just by jihadis, but also by some in the press. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. On Sunday, a group called the American Freedom Defense Initiative held an event in Garland, Texas, asking people to draw cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, which is considered blasphemous in Islam. They were trying to make a point about intolerance by some in the Muslim world and about principles on which the USA is supposed to stand firm. Namely, that no matter how abhorrent one might find another's words, in this country we defend their right to say them. Standing up for that principle is not an endorsement of the controversial speech. It is promoting a value at the very core of who we are. The group holding this contest was not on TV shouting its message. It was holding a private event behind closed doors to make a point about liberty. Sure enough, the jihadis responded and were shot dead by a quick reacting police officer on scene. Incredibly, what has happened in the days since is a rush to condemn the event organizers, with nary a mention of the radical Islamists who sought to murder them over a cartoon. By the way, these two guys now reportedly may have links to ISIS, or at least were inspired by them. Over the last 72 hours, we have heard the event organizers condemned for being too provocative, too stupid, even for inviting their own attempted murder.
We shouldn't let that free speech turn into hate speech.
An anti-Islamic group held a contest on who could be the nastiest, draw the nastiest cartoon of Muhammad. Do you believe that people set that kind of a mousetrap?
Everyone has the right to freedom of speech, and it's good to stand by that principle. But these people are not standing by that principle. They're standing by the principle of hatred for other people.
I think that an analogy is a Klan group that decides to hold a cartoon contest satirizing black people. Certainly that would make many people angry, and it might even bring out a black nationalist or two who was willing to do some shooting, him or herself. Is that a good thing? I think not.
But what people are saying is that there's always this fine line, you know, between freedom of speech.
Between freedom of speech and provocation. If this is where American sentiment stands on this issue, then the jihadis are officially winning. The terrorist point was to shut us up. Not just the organizers of this event, but any American who deigns to disagree with their way of life or thinking. There may be a time and place to discuss whether this kind of discourse is helpful to our country, to our fight with the jihadis, and so on. But within hours of an attempted murder of the very folks under attack, the reaction is, well, you asked for it. Well, they did not ask for it. In this country, we have every right to say what we want to say about Muhammad or anyone else for that matter. And the rest of society can condemn this group's speech as a matter of decorum. But how about waiting a beat until the crime scene has been cleared, lest we appear more concerned about offending Islam than we are about a fundamental pledge we've all taken, namely liberty for all. By rushing to attack the very people whose lives were targeted, the press, knowingly or not, draws a kind of moral equivalence between those who speak words some find offensive and those who would kill over such words. Moments ago, I had the chance to speak with Eugene Volokh. He is one of the leading constitutional scholars in the United States. He teaches free speech law and a First Amendment clinic at UCLA School of Law. He clerked for U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. His work is cited by the U.S. Supreme Court on the First Amendment. And he is also the founder and co-author of the Volokh Conspiracy blog, which is now on the Washington Post website and among the most widely read and respected legal blogs in the country. Professor, very good of you to be here tonight. So let's start with this. Was this protected speech or wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no exception under the First Amendment for blasphemy. There's no exception for speech that offends people because of their religious beliefs. People are free to express themselves this way. People are free to engage in even much more offensive speech than that.
And so when we see people like a news anchor at another network who has a law degree, but I don't think has practiced law, come out and tweet today saying hate speech is excluded from protection, and follows up with, don't just say you love the Constitution, read it. He is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing in the Constitution about hate speech. And if you look at the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution, Supreme Court has made clear that all viewpoints are protected under the First Amendment, regardless of whether they're hateful or otherwise. Even the Nazis are protected under the First Amendment. Even the KKK is protected under the First Amendment. And this speech is critical of a particular ideology. It's critical of Islam. In particular, it's critical of extremist Islam. But even beyond that, it's true that the organizers of the event think that Islam in general is in many ways dangerous and unsound. That is, they have every right to express that view, including by commissioning drawings of Muhammad. This is fully protected by the First Amendment. Everything the Supreme Court has said supports that.
We've seen that recently in the Westboro Baptist Church case that went up to the Supreme Court, in which 8-1 the U.S. Supreme Court sided with those people from the Westboro Baptist Church who were running around with signs saying God hates the F-A-G-S word at a dead man's funeral, at a soldier's funeral.
Yeah, and so what's interesting is in that case, there was speech. It was actually not right at the funeral, but about 1,000 feet away, but on occasion of a funeral. This was not the case in the, with the Texas Art Show. That was speech that specifically targeted a private person for harsh condemnation, not at all so with this show. That was speech that specifically talked about how it's a good thing. Thank God for dead soldiers, because that's God's righteous punishment, is to kill Americans. That's not this speech. This speech is much less offensive than the speech that the Supreme Court in Snyder v. Phelps held was constitutionally protected. To be sure, the speech is offensive to some Muslims who think that any depiction of Muhammad is offensive. Well, the law is not made by religious groups that get to say, well, this speech is blasphemy, we get to shut you up over that. There is no exception for blasphemy. There is no exception for even hate speech, which this speech, I think, is not. And
what of the people who say, well, even if it's allowed, it shouldn't be done because it has no value, this type of discussion at this type of event?
Well, surely this kind of discussion does have value. It has value in debate about Islam and about the role of Islam and about the reaction of some Muslims. Fortunately, only a small portion of Muslims to these kinds of things. But beyond that, it has value as a reaffirmation of our free speech rights. It has value as an act of defiance. It has value of people saying, look, we are not going to be shut up. When you tell us that we cannot draw pictures of Muhammad, when you tell us we cannot say these things or else you'll kill us, that just means we're going to do it again and again to show that you cannot threaten Americans into submission. In fact, the winning cartoon in this particular contest was one in which there was a picture of Muhammad saying something like, you can't draw me, and then there's a mouth bubble coming out as if from the artist saying, that's why I'm drawing you. That the whole point of this was to say, you cannot tell Americans, you cannot tell a free people what you can and cannot say. And that's a very important message to say, especially in times like these.
So when you see members of the media, I mean, for the most part, rushing to condemn the event, I mean, there's been so much more discussion about how they shouldn't have had this event and it was too provocative and stupid than there has been to focus on the attackers. What's your reaction?
Well, I haven't monitored all of the television channels. I have seen people indeed say, look, this isn't what people should be saying. It's too provocative. Well, there are times when First Amendment rights have to be defended. And they have to be defended by saying, we are going to say these things even though we realize there's a risk of violence, even though we realize there's a risk of attack. The only way we can protect our free speech rights is by reasserting their free speech rights. Look, lots of things are provocative. In times past, and maybe even the present, a black man and a white woman, say, walking down the street in some neighborhoods might be provocative. A gay man kissing another gay man in a public place might be provocative. Is that a reason to say, well, we condemn you for doing that because some people might attack you for it? Not at all. It's a reason to say that you are entitled to express yourself, whether it's express your love of each other or express your disapproval of a particular religious ideology, notwithstanding the fact that people might want to attack you for it.
And in that Westboro Baptist Church, Church case decided 8-1 in favor of their right to say the hateful things, the court found as follows: speech is powerful. It can stir people to action, move them to tears of both joy and sorrow, and, as it did here, inflict great pain. We cannot react, the court concluded, to that pain by punishing the speaker. As a nation, we have chosen a different course. Professor Volokh, thank you for your expertise tonight. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks very much for having me.
So how is this free speech fight playing with the presidential candidates? Dr. Ben Carson is here live in a Kelly File exclusive. This is his first TV interview since declaring his run for the White House. He will weigh in on that. Plus, the amazing story from his childhood you likely never knew until now. Wait until you see the piece we put together on Dr. Carson for you tonight. Plus, we have the video the Clinton camp did not want you to see from an event they tried to shield from the cameras. We'll show you what Fox News uncovered right after this break.
Where's the prom going to be?